We'll explore the beauty of Charleston's public and private gardens right after this. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. If you love old gardens and good old Southern hospitality, I bet eventually you'll find your way to Charleston, South Carolina. I know every time I visit there, I come away so inspired by the beautiful gardens. And in today's show, we're going to visit a few of those, and I hope it has the same effect on you. We're talking small courtyards, expansive backyards, and glorious plantations, plus a fantastic fresh from the garden recipe inspired by the Gullah People. Sing it, girls! I'll also give you some tips on caring for garden ornament, and we'll answer a viewer question about the essential tools every gardener needs. So get comfortable because a half hour of beautiful Charleston is coming your way. One of the most enjoyable aspects of visiting a place like Charleston, South Carolina is the element of surprise. Along busy streets such as this, you can find some of the most delightful gardens. Well, hello, Mary Martha.
Hello, good to see you, Alan.
Thank you. Mary Martha, tell me about the history of these small front gardens.
In this part of Charleston, there was a terrible fire in 1861. This neighborhood wasn't rebuilt until the 1870s and 1880s. And we still have our Charleston-style house, but we have these precious little spaces in the front of these properties and the bay window. And when we first moved here, I planted it very informally. In fact, one year I just threw out some poppy seed, larkspur, and Queen Anne's lace. But after Hurricane Hugo in 1990, when we were redoing this garden, I came up with this wonderful little plan. And the little knot garden imitates the oval that you see in the wrought iron going up the staircase into the house.
So it reflects that motif.
It reflects that motif.
I love the two conical shaped bay trees that you have in the center of the little parterre knot garden.
Yes, it's amazing how much they've grown since 1990 when they were planted. And the shape has changed several times. The shape has changed several times.
All it takes is the shears and a little time.
Right. We have Champion's pink cluster. And then we have old Chinas and old tea roses that do well here. In fact, the large rose blooming in the front garden today is one of the Bermuda mystery roses.
Now, is that Smith's Parish?
That is Smith's Parish.
It's a beautiful plant.
And then the ancient vitex that is here survived the storm and may be one of the older ones in the city of Charleston. It does well.
Wonderful.
And this is really a year-round garden as well.
Easily done in Charleston.
A lot of Mediterranean plants, a lot of southeastern plants, as well as one or two natives here in the front garden.
The front of Mary Martha's garden is laid out in a formal style, but the back is something quite different. It's more loosely planted, but with the same degree of care. I wanted to show you this garden because it's one of those happy accidents. You see, Mary Martha's garden looked much different before Hurricane Hugo, but she quickly turned what could have been a disaster and made it into a beautiful retreat. It's a good lesson for us all. Now up next, a Charleston author gives us a tour of her private garden. And a little later, Middleton Place Plantation and a recipe inspired by the people of the Low Country. So stay with us. I mentioned earlier my visit to Charleston, where I met up with Louisa for a tour of their garden. Of course, the house was designed in the 18th century, but how much of the garden reflects that period, Louisa?
Well, the garden has some elements of 18th century design in it, but my husband designed it and is still working on the design of it. He designed it about 20 years ago.
Really? And the process just continued?
Yes.
Isn't it fun?
It's so much fun.
The thing that strikes me about this bed, the way you have it planted now, is that you've allowed serendipity to enter into the garden with these wonderful larkspur coming up everywhere.
Well, you have to, and you should have seen what Hugo blew in. There were all sorts of strange weeds and flowers and plants. Yes.
Yeah. Foreign visitors.
Lots of
brought in by the storm. Now tell me a little bit about some of the shrubs that you've planted along here, Louisa, to create this effect.
Well, the red-leafed ones, which will green up later in the season, are Loropetalum rubrum.
Right, the Chinese witch hazel.
Is that what it is?
Yes, that's a common name for it.
And then viburnum on either side of the magnolia. The vine on the wall is Ficus pumila and has to be clipped constantly. We lost some trees in here, and so we're training various vines such as Confederate jasmine along the wall.
Yeah, I really like the way you've trained these vines along the wall. You've created a beautiful tapestry of bloom and leaf.
Thank you. We've tried very hard to do that.
The loose planting of these shrubs and the rhythm that they create is a beautiful contrast to the formality of the parterres.
Yes, I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah, it's a nice juxtaposition. And look at what we have here. My goodness, look what a beautiful lettuce border.
Thank you. It's my only successful crop.
Oh my gosh, look at this. You've got quite a variety. Butter crunch, red sail, beautiful. You know, I've got a border of lettuce planted in my garden, and I've got some of the ornamental onions coming up in it, but I haven't thought about the larkspur. That's a really handsome combination.
Well, thanks, and I haven't thought about the onions. I'll have to try that. We pick a salad every night.
Oh, isn't it great? Yeah. I've mixed some little violas in with mine, and I'll actually eat the flowers of the viola as well.
Oh, pretty.
Yeah, it makes a nice salad. It's just so much fun to mix things up and experiment.
Oh, I do a lot of that. I have pass-along plants. I have plants from my garden club exchange, plants from Walmart and Kmart without labels.
Right. Mine is much the same. Now, this is really a handsome structure.
Structure's the right word.
So the idea here is to grow this Japanese yew within this framework and use it as a guide for the clipping.
Yes, it's called a tutor, the guide. It's
Right.
literally a tutor.
The tutor that helps support it. I've had some similar made in my garden to support my roses.
These were made by a local iron worker, but you can buy similar structures pre-assembled at your local garden centers.
Yes, they make a wonderful vertical and architectural element in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, look at this over here. What a wonderful surprise.
This is our secret garden.
It is indeed. I love it. It's really beautiful the way you look over the holly fern and see that small pond with the cast iron plant as a backdrop.
Thank you. We enjoy the pond and we enjoy the goldfish in the pond.
Now, is that your potting shed beyond?
It is.
You know, this is a good example of how even in a small garden, you can accentuate that sense of expansiveness by putting an object at the back and then layering different objects in the foreground. It's really marvelous.
Thank you. I hadn't looked at it that way, but you're right.
What a wonderful view, the back of the house.
It's my favorite view.
Look at those church steeples. Now, this is one of the best examples of a borrowed view that I can imagine. It's really fantastic.
I'm grateful for it.
Up next, I've got tips for cleaning your garden ornaments. And a little later, a recipe from the kitchens of Middleton Place Plantation. So don't go away. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome back. Well, today we're looking at some fantastic Charleston gardens, which got me to thinking about how both new and old gardens inspire us, as well as the garden ornament we find in them. You know, in my garden, I like garden ornament that has a nice patina on it, but there's a fine line between something that has that patina and something that's just downright dirty and needs a good cleaning. So I thought I'd give you a few tips on how to care for garden ornament. First, identify the type of garden ornament you're dealing with. Is it concrete, bronze, or some sort of synthetic? Second, realize that you need to use the least invasive method possible. You don't want to clean off a nice patina of age, and you don't want to damage old items and ruin their value. For concrete, well, it's really simple to take care of. What you may need to do is just brush it down vigorously with a mild detergent and wash it off. Concrete comes in many different forms. This is a sun mask to hang on a wall, and as you can see, it's quite old. There's a crack here in the center, but the way I've held it together is I've just taken a wire and wrapped it around the circumference and tightened it up, and the tightened wire holds it together. It's a great way to take care of a mask like this. Now, concrete can also be tinted. This looks like terracotta, but this rooster is actually concrete that's tinted with terracotta dye. And again, all I do with this is just wash it down from time to time with a detergent and spray it off. It looks great in the garden. Bronze is a favorite medium with garden designers because it holds up so well in the garden. It can last for centuries. These sculptures can take high-pressure washings or a general scrubbing from time to time. As with any metal surface, you want to be careful not to use an abrasive pad or wire brush because this might scratch the surface. It's time for viewer mail, and this one comes from Kate in Oregon, and she says, Alan, I'm just getting into gardening, so what are the essential tools I should have? Well, that's a good question. It all depends on the type of gardening you're going to get into, Kate, but why don't we go through and put together a little starter kit for a new gardener. You can't go wrong with a good pair of pruners. You just want to keep them sharp and well-oiled, and they'll last for years. Loppers are great if you have large shrubs or trees that need pruning. And shears are a good investment if you have hedges. And it's important to remember to give your hands some protection with some well-made gloves. For container gardening, you'll certainly need a trowel, and for those bigger digging jobs, such as creating a new flower bed, you'll need a good shovel. And I like a shovel that has a generous ledge like you see here. You can really get your foot on that. Now, the other nice thing about having this ledge here is that if you use the shovel a lot, it doesn't hurt the arch of your foot. I know that if I'm out in the garden and I'm digging a lot of holes, the arch of my foot can ache if I don't have this kind of support. Now, the other thing I like about this shovel is it has a metal handle. So when you put your foot down on it, press it into the soil, you can really get your weight behind it and move some earth. Now, there are many tools that you can choose from. So the best advice I have is to look at the environment you plan to be working in and think about what tools would benefit you the most and build out from that. In other words, let the needs of your garden be the guide. But now when it comes to pruning, there are 4 tools that I fall back on every year. Now, I select the tool based on the size of the stem or branch that I plan on pruning. For instance, these hedge shears are designed to clip soft young growth like small twigs or shrubs. If I'm cutting something larger than the size of a pencil, I reach for my loppers. Just remember, when you're choosing loppers, you'll need to keep in mind that the longer the handles, the more leverage. And leverage is what you need to make larger cuts. With mine, I found I can trim branches that are up to 3 inches in diameter. Now, if you find that the job is too big for your loppers, it's time to break out the pruning saw. Saws with raker teeth like these will cut large limbs quickly, while a bow saw like this is lightweight and can make quick work of medium-sized branches. But you know, of all the pruning tools I use, the one I call on the most would have to be this one, my trusty hand pruners. I trim everything from perennials to medium-sized stems of shrubs like roses. Just remember, one of the secrets to pruning is choosing the right tool for the job. Up next, a Charleston recipe inspired by the Gullah People. So stay with us for this tasty treat. Today's show is inspired by the gardens of Charleston. This garden is Middleton Place Plantation. It's a National Historic Landmark, and the home and gardens have survived revolution, Civil War, and even an earthquake. This part of South Carolina was once known for its rice production, and the people of the Low Country have made good use of rice in some of their favorite native dishes. Chef Tim Bedwell and I gathered some garden fresh ingredients one morning to put together a traditional Gullah rice dish.
We're going to make Gullah rice with shrimp and sausage.
Wonderful. And you're going to put these onions to good use?
We're going to use these onions. We're going to use some oregano and some parsley and chives from the herb garden and some fresh shrimp.
Can't wait. Let's do it.
Let's go.
Now, what do you need first? The oil?
I need the olive oil.
All right. There you go. Now, about how much olive oil are you using, Tim?
This is going to be about 3 tablespoons. And chili peppers.
All right.
Basically, we're just going to infuse the oil and cook them just a little bit. I want the heat without it being too hot. We'll just cook them here for just a minute.
All right. Well, you've got them going now.
They're about ready, so let's go ahead and
There you go.
take those out.
Now, about how much minced garlic do you have there?
That is 4 cloves of garlic.
4 cloves.
And then after this browns, we're going to add the onions and the peppers.
And quantity there, what do we have?
Quantity is it's about a cup. Same thing with the pepper. Okay, we'll let this cook for a few minutes, and then we'll be ready for the tomatoes and the sausage. And you know, I think we can go ahead and add the herbs.
Okay. How about the oregano first?
The oregano first.
And that's, what, about 2 tablespoons?
About 2 tablespoons.
Okay. Chopped fresh oregano, and then here's the parsley. Same quantity there?
Same quantity.
2 tablespoons. And then we've got the chives.
The chives, yeah.
The chop. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, now we're ready for the tomatoes. This is going to cook for about 3 more minutes, and then we're going to add the sausage.
Now that's summer sausage.
Summer sausage.
And what quantity did we use here?
That was about a cup also. So all we really want to do is warm the sausage, and we can go ahead and
Bring on the shrimp?
Bring on the shrimp.
How much shrimp is there? A couple of pounds?
That's probably about 1.5 pounds.
Pound and a half, okay. Now these will cook how long?
About 3 minutes, just until they turn completely white and pink. It doesn't take very long at all. Okay, now we're going to add about 4 cups of rice.
About 2/3 of what you have there in the bowl.
Exactly.
Just fold it in.
Stir this. We're going to add a pinch of salt. We'll do 2 pinches of salt.
2 pinches of salt, yeah. I like a lot of salt.
A grind of pepper.
All right, there you go.
Okay. You ready to taste?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How's that?
Look at those shrimp. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's terrific.
Good?
Thank you so much for sharing this recipe with us.
You're welcome.
A little flavor of the Low Country.
That's it.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you enjoyed our tour of Charleston Gardens, and make sure you try that recipe. It really is delicious. Until next time, get out there and grow something. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.